Hi, Adrian Davis here, and I wanted to take a few moments and talk about two areas that are highly neglected when it comes to more complex selling. One of them is the status quo. And what I mean by status quo is really the current state. That when your buyers are buying from you, what they're really buying is a vision that you can move them from the state that they're in today to a better state. They want to move from the current state to a future state. And often, salespeople will do their diagnosis. They will get to understand the challenges that the buyers or the buyer community is facing, and they'll see that they can come up with a solution. And in fact, it's a very good solution. And so they'll then present their solution. And because of the fit, that it's such a good fit, salespeople will then, and the reception, the initial reception of the solution, they will then assume, well, this is great. I'm going to put the probability up to 70, 80%. This looks really good. Everybody's engaged. And so they feel confused when a few weeks later, or a few months later, or even sometimes even a few days later, the prospect cools off. And that initial excitement is no longer there. And it just feels like you're just stuck. And then the deal sits in the pipeline or in the funnel, and it just languishes there. And months later, in bigger cases, years later, still no decision has been made. What's going on? Well, a large part of this is a result of the salesperson neglecting how difficult it is for organizations to move out of the current state, to move out of the status quo. It's almost like the best way I like to think of it is the status quo has this gravitational pull. And whenever anything tries to leave it, it pulls it back. And the way to think about this is really the current state is a system. In fact, it's a system of systems. There are political systems, there are cultural systems, there are technology systems, there are social systems, there are many systems. And these systems, one of the hallmarks of systems is that they seek stability. The systems work best in a stable environment. So whenever there is any chance or threat of disruption to the environment that the system is operating within, elements of the system will move very quickly to neutralize the threat and ensure that everything remains stable so that the system can be optimized and the system will work ad infinitum. So when you propose a change, there are elements of the system that, even though it seems like such a great idea, that are going to collude and work together to sabotage the change. And this is going to happen at 2 points. It's going to happen during the sales process itself. So you may not be successful in making the sale as a result. But if you are successful in making the sale, it's also going to happen at implementation. So maybe you were successful through the first gate and you made the sale, but now you've got to implement the solution. And those elements of the system that do not want this change, at this point, they're going to really flex their muscles and show their strength and sabotage the solution so that it never gets implemented and everything can return back to the current state. In order to successfully move an organization out of the current state into a better state, the second area of neglect is where you need to focus your attention, and that is stakeholder management. That you have to manage the stakeholders through change in order to get them to accept the change and in order to successfully implement the change. So by stakeholder management, so first of all, let's define what I mean by stakeholder. A stakeholder is anyone that has a vested interest in the outcome of your project. So whatever it is you are proposing, think about that future state, the outcome of your project. Who cares? Who really cares about that? And when I say who cares, it's on both sides. Who cares in the sense that they want this project to go ahead? And who cares in the sense that it might be devastating to them if this project is successful, that it's going to hurt them in some way? These are the key stakeholders that you need to know. And a big area of neglect is simply just not identifying who the stakeholders are. So job number one, who cares? And too often salespeople are talking to one or two, three or four people, and they think that that's it. And as long as they get these people on side, everything's great. But there may be several people behind the scenes that care very deeply about the outcome of the project, and they're exerting their influence one way or the other on the project. And in order for you to have better insight into whether or not this project is going to proceed, you need to identify all the stakeholders. And in some cases, identifying the stakeholders is not the same thing as having a relationship with all the stakeholders. In some cases, you may not be able to have any relationship with them at all. They may simply be inaccessible. Maybe they're in a different country. Maybe they are so senior in the organization that it's just not possible for you to gain access to them. There may be a number of reasons why, or maybe they just simply don't want to meet with you. There may be a number of reasons why you cannot have a relationship with all the stakeholders. But that does not absolve you of the responsibility of knowing who the stakeholders are. Once you've identified the stakeholders, your next job is to understand what each stakeholder wants. What are their goals? And how well does what you're proposing align with what they want? If it does, that's great. That's going to make your work a whole lot easier. If it doesn't, can you figure out how it could? How might it align with what they want? And it's just a matter of educating them that this is actually good for them. And if not, maybe you need to tweak or adapt what you're proposing so that it is good for them. But you need to know who these stakeholders are, what they want. The next step is to understand how influential are they in the organization? How much say do they have? And then also you want to understand how supportive are they of your solution? And with these two elements, and you can use a grading system from 0 to 5 or 0 to 10 or high, medium, low. It really doesn't matter, but have some way of grading how much influence do they have in the organization, how much influence do they have over the other stakeholders, and how supportive are they of your organization. And create a matrix. The vertical axis at the bottom would be very low influence in the organization. Anybody at the top has very high influence in the organization. And then anybody on the left of the grid, on the x-axis, has very low support for your solution. Anybody on the right of the x-axis has very high support of your organization. So you're going to get this matrix then. And obviously those in the top right-hand corner are going to demonstrate that they have high influence in the organization and high support for your solution. You need to leverage these stakeholders. But again, be careful, because they're operating in a system of systems, and they may not be able to exert as much influence as they need to for you at that particular time. And so you just need to be sensitive to that, and that's another discussion we could have. But on the other side then, are very, very important for you to understand. These are the stakeholders that have very high influence in the organization, but very low support for your solution. And you need to figure out how to move them over to the right-hand side so that they can become supportive of your organization, or at least how to neutralize them. So, in the end, they're sort of indifferent. It's okay. They see that it's not really going to impact them, and they're neutralized. And there are ways and means to do that. And then those at the bottom that don't have a lot of influence in the organization, you do need to figure out how you can leverage those resources one way or the other. So that's what I call sort of just an understanding of the landscape. To go a step further is to understand these stakeholders. What is their relationship with each other? And how much influence do they exert over each other? There's another matrix. In fact, I have some templates that I'm happy to share with you. If you write me at adrian@adriandavis.com, I can just share with you some of these stakeholder templates that will help you understand how to understand the influence that stakeholders have over each other, and how to develop strategies to move these stakeholders along, and how to ensure then, as you go through, or as they're going through the buying process, when to engage certain types of stakeholders. Some you need to engage very early, some engage in the middle, some engage later or re-engage later in the process. But it's these two areas that I think account for a lot of the reason that opportunities get stuck in the funnel. Number one, salespeople just assume that it's easy for an organization to adopt new ideas. There's a need, we've done our diagnosis, we've got something that's a great fit. Oh, I'll just present it and I'll write a proposal and I'll put 80%, 90% probability this is going to close, and it's going to close this quarter. And then it doesn't. Because moving from the status quo is extremely challenging. And one of the best ways to help an organization and help your champion move the organization from current state to future state is this whole area of stakeholder management. And often your champion might not understand how important this is. And so you need to understand how to work with him or her or them to help them manage the stakeholders through this change process. And not just through the sale, but also through the implementation. Again, if you'd like some help with this, reach out to me at adrian@adriandavis.com.